Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Hello and welcome. My name is Dirk Dunning. Today we have another fascinating interview for you in our interview series featuring Faith Masimer interviewing Frank DeMarco about his extraordinary work with Rita Warren, both before and more intriguingly after her passing. Who are we? I'm Dirk Dunning, today's host. Prior to my retirement, I had a 40-year career as a professional engineer and scientist. I've also been a lifelong explorer of the metaphysical with deep experience in time-space alteration, energy healing, altered states of consciousness, near-death experience, remote viewing, and more. Our interviewer today, Faith Masimer, is a practicing evidential psychic medium, animal communicator, energy healer, and intuitive guide. Her work focuses especially on grief support and is rooted in a profound reverence for spirit, nature, and the unseen threads that connect us all. Our guest today, Frank DeMarco, is the co-founder of Hampton Roads Publishing Company and its chief editor for 16 years. He's the author of 10 books and 4 novels, Muddy Tracks, The Cosmic Internet, The Sphere and the Hologram, and 4 Rita's World books, Rita's World Volume 2, Awakening from the 3D World, It's All One World, chronicling his groundbreaking work in communication with the non-physical world. I had the great good fortune to know Rita Warren personally. She was in life and remains in the afterlife a remarkable woman. I had the privilege of hearing many of the conversations between Rita and Frank as they unfolded, and later after her transition through Frank's continued work. These dialogues are the foundation of the books many of you have read. Rita's journey, as told by Frank offers an astonishing look at consciousness beyond the veil. This promises to be a rich and meaningful conversation. With that, Faith, I hand it over to you. Have fun.
Thank you so much. All right, we are back, Frank. Welcome back.
Oh, I think it'll be as much fun as it was last time. Let's find out.
Absolutely. All right, so kind of going back just real quick. You do all this work with Rita. She transitions over to the spirit world, and then she wakes you up within a dream and says, "We're not done." And so then what? How did you begin your process?
Well, my process always has been to use a journal, a spiral bound journal book, and I write it longhand. And usually it takes about an hour at a time, often in the middle of the night. The middle of the night seems to be a very quiet time, spiritually as well as physically. And
I have heard that before. Is it like 3 a.m.? Like
often. In my case, it was fortuitous because as a lifelong asthmatic, there would be times when I couldn't sleep anymore, and I wasn't comfortable. But if I sat down and worked, then I would become comfortable. It's like you move your mind to another place, you know. Well, Rita and I had worked together, as you said. We knew each other for 8 years before she died in 2008. About 6 years later, I guess it was a dream. At the end of it, I realized that she was basically saying, "Okay, time to go back to work." And this was 2014, and we began again. And for 6 months, almost daily, I think it might have been a skip or two, but almost daily, I would sit down with her. And my old business partner, Bob Friedman, was on the list of people that I distribute my writings to. And after a while, Bob had left Hampton Roads the same as I had. He had started another publishing company, his third, called Rainbow Ridge Books, and he proposed that we put him out as a book. I was delighted, you know. So 6 months worth of stuff would have made a very thick book. Bob said, "Let's do it in 2." So we came up with Rita's World 1 and 2.
Amazing.
3 months worth of work, yeah. And then after a while, it stopped, and people would say, "Well, are there going to be any more?" And I don't know.
Right.
I'm the last one to find out. And she did come back with my favorite book, awakening from the 3D world, talking about her not near-death experience, but her death experience. And
Oh, okay.
as I
Yes.
mentioned before, she had all these questions before she died, and she knew that I did as well. And we had
Hmm.
talked to the guys upstairs, as we call them, and they had come up with stuff. But now she had been through it, having been through it, and still having
Yeah.
a close connection with me, still knowing the questions that she had and the questions that I had with her. She was able to answer it, and it's a beautiful description of what happens. Yeah, go
And
ahead.
that's what I want to get into. I want to know what her questions were and what her answers were, because basically she's asking all these questions and then she comes back to you and answers them, right?
Yeah. Conceptually, the questions were, what happens to us after we die? I mean,
Yeah.
everything can fit into that,
Yeah.
without going into the specifics, it's not necessary. But you hear so many reports of things like past life reviews, meeting with old lovers or old people that you have loved,
Hmm.
people, animals, pets, and all,
Yeah.
and losing the senses, and then we didn't know. We sort of had a coherent idea, but until you die, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So Rita went through it, and it was it was an amazing sequence because she took it sort of in order.
Really.
Now, bearing in mind, anything that happens in the non-3D is happening outside of sequential time. And in order for us to make sense of it in our brains here in the 3D, we have to sort of cram it into sequential time, which sort of distorts things. It can't be helped.
Right.
With the best of intent and the most care that you can give it, you're still taking an experience that was a gestalt, that was all at once and had
Hmm.
emotional overtones and all these other things. And you're having to put it into words, which is sequential. One thing follows the other thing follows the other thing. And that's not how it happens. You've probably read people's near-death experiences where they say, well, I don't know. I don't understand how this fit into there, but it seemed like they happened at the same time. Well, to my
Hmm.
mind, what's happening is they're taking a non-3D experience and they're remembering it in a way that makes sense to them. But because they're having to remember it in a sequential way, it's unintentionally distorting it. So,
Right.
so and Rita knew all these problems, and she had known them before she died. But after she went over, she took it rather logically, I think, which would be Rita, because Rita was a lifelong coming. But when you die, what's the first thing that happens to you? You lose connection with your senses.
Hmm.
Your senses are how you've experienced the world all this time, and now they're not there. Now they're not working. Where are you? So this is a very loose explanation, and
Sure.
but conceptually, you're in the dark and where am I? What am I? All you
Yeah.
have left is yourself. One of the things that happens is you begin going over your own memories. You begin
Hmm.
retracing your own life's path, right? Not necessarily sequentially, but it's like it can all throw in at once. But you
Right.
see your life in such a different way, such an expanded way. For one thing, you realize, oh, this is the effect I had on him. This is the effect I had on her, and the effect they had on other people because of what happened with me, good or bad, well, probably both,
Hmm.
and this came because of this, and I thought that was bad. But I see now that this, you draw all
Right.
these connections.
See the whole picture, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, and that's only the beginning of the process. First, you lost your senses, literally. So
Yeah.
now you're living in your own world, in a sense. Now you're
Mm.
exploring it a little bit, and you're seeing where you have been. Then, after a while, you begin realizing. Hear that after a while. You see how the sequence
Yeah. Yeah.
fits
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
there. You can't help it. You just have to discount it. But after a while, you realize, oh, wait a minute. I'm not just the part of me that was in 3D that I recognize. There's also, I extended into non 3D all this time.
There's
And when
more.
you do that,
Hmm.
then not only have you redefined who you are, you've also redefined what is available to you, what your purpose was, how well you did or not well you did,
Does
and
she, I'm curious, does she mention being met by other beings? Because a lot of people talk about that too, but obviously we don't know till we get there. But
when you say other beings, do you mean other ex-humans, or are you talking about aliens?
yeah,
Which,
loved ones, guides.
yes, yes, well, very much. And in fact, it's interesting. You wind up, according to her, well, there's somebody else, I can't remember offhand who, but somebody else told me the same thing. The people that, oh, Bruce Moen, after Bruce went over, um, the people that you find out were the most important to you aren't necessarily the ones you had thought were the most important to you.
Interesting.
It's certainly not a matter of the ones who are the most famous or the richest or the most successful
Of
or the most
course.
beautiful or anything like that. It's unpredictable. But you realize, oh, that person made a huge difference in my life,
Mm,
or I made a huge difference in their life. And sometimes you don't even know it ahead of time. But yes,
yeah.
anybody that you were connected with, anybody that you touched, apparently, I don't know that Rita would have said that, but I think we can go that far. Anything that you touched is now, in a sense, a part of you, and
Wow.
can be visited. Okay. Now that's the reason I put it that way is there is a tendency to think of things separate,
Hmm.
and it makes a little more sense if you realize that everything is connected, and that when we talk about I went there and visited him, nothing wrong with saying it that way, but you could easily say, hey, he and I have always been connected, and now I was aware of it.
Hmm.
It takes away the journey part of it. It takes away the separateness part of it, because ultimately you find out due to the strands and the threads that we talked about before.
Would you say, can I ask a question here? Would you say that it's kind of like a group mind? Like,
Yes, I would.
yeah.
However, I would also say, look at it two ways. One is a group mind that we're a part of,
Hmm.
or we're a whole bunch of minds that form a group mind. In other words, we're all either already part of one thing or we form
Yeah.
one thing. But that's just a
Okay.
matter of viewpoint. I think
Right.
both are true on what appeals to you, or what content.
Okay.
Right? You're
Okay.
asking good questions, so please keep on.
Yeah, because I've heard that like people come, they incarnate together in like groups or soul
Yeah.
pods or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm curious if maybe those people we meet in life are part of that, those people that make a big difference for us. And then when we cross over, it's those same people again because we've always been connected.
My inclination would be to say yes. I'm not positive that Rita ever actually talked about it per se, or even the guys,
Yeah.
but in general, it seems like the only people that we can be aware of are people that we have a resonance with. And
Hmm.
so almost by definition, anybody in your life is a part of your pod. But
Okay.
but that's not quite the same thing as saying you've been with them before. It's
Mhm.
more like supposing you had a red thread and a green thread and a brown thread, and along that thread were various individuals. Maybe there's somebody who comes along on the brown thread, or some part of a person, some set of qualities,
Mhm.
and they're now a part of you. That doesn't mean you ever had anything to do with that other person or any of the other people that thread may string together, but it does mean that energy and your energy align. They interact with each other. I'm
So
not
does that, yeah, I'm gonna try to make sure I understand. So is it sort of like the law of attraction where you attract what you are, or like what you're, maybe not, it's probably not the quite the right term, but you're a vibrational match. Is that
that's what I call resonance. Yes. Yes.
okay?
If you
S-
I think you even have to have a vibrational match to have an opposition, although I wouldn't swear to it. But like if you have a sworn enemy, it may be
mm,
only possible because you're on the same wavelength.
On some level, yeah, there's
Yeah.
something. I also think about it like mirrors, like reflections. Often
Yes.
people reflect back to you
Right. And
something.
if you're not on the same wavelength, that's not going to happen. I have
Okay.
an analogy that I use. Supposing you and I are driving on an interstate, and all you're interested in is trucks. You're not interested in cars at all. We
Mm-hmm.
drive for 8 hours along the interstate, and at the end I say, wow, did you see that 1964 red Corvair? And you say, no. Well, the Corvair might as well not have been there for you. You were interested in trucks.
Yeah.
Only the analogy works better if we realize it's not who you're interested in so much as what you resonate to. But if you don't resonate
Mm-hmm.
to something, it's not in your world.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my take on it. I don't know that Rita
Good
would say.
analogy. Okay. Okay. Amazing. I'm trying to think of like a couple other questions. I guess it's hard. It's like I want to know it all, but it's almost hard to even phrase it
Tell me
because
about it.
like I want to know it all. I want to know like what happens after that. But then it's like to say that doesn't quite work either.
Well,
Like,
no, that's faith. leading questions actually work well. And I have often, when I'm dealing with the guys, as you know, intuitive link communication, which was their term for what we do, is not
Yeah.
channeling. It's not where I am receptive and they're pouring in the information. It's
Uh-huh.
interactive. It's more like a conversation. Almost, it could even be a quarrel, except we have too much good humor between us. It's an interaction back and forth, and so it isn't a one-way street. And often, if I were talking to them, I would run out of ideas about what to talk about. And sometimes I would write literally, I'd say, what would I ask you if I had enough sense to know what it is I should be asking? And that was enough of a
Perfect.
leading question that I could get them going. But it took me a while to realize they made an analogy a long time ago that said, we're the record, you're the needle, which shows that my guys are kind of retro, right? But they have all the information. But
Okay.
where they go depends on where my attention is. That is where they go as far as I'm concerned, obviously. You know,
Uh-huh.
they still have all the information, or they have all the information that they have. Whether they know everything, they say they don't know everything. But the only place that I contact them is where my needle of attention goes.
Right.
Now,
They have more information, but they can't give it to you unless you're a vibrational match to it, unless you're sort of in that realm.
well, not quite.
Okay.
Now, if they have something they want to get across, and I'm open enough, they can do it just out of the blue, and often they do.
Ah, okay.
But what you're saying isn't wrong either, because there seems to be, I call it the weather, astrological conditions, whatever. Certain times are more available, are more amenable, are more, they work better for some kinds of information than other times are.
Okay.
And I've often said, how people say that in our time the veil is thinning. Well, I think
Yes.
that's a different analogy, but my analogy would be the astrological lineup is now allowing things easier that would have been very difficult before.
I
So
love that.
100 years ago, I don't know that anybody could have done intuitive linked communication, I'll say, because it just wasn't that easy. I mean, people often had to go into trance states in
Mm-hmm.
order to get anything.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but 100 years ago, when people tried to talk to what I call the guys upstairs, they relied upon a medium finding a control. And the control would be a disembodied person on the other side who could lead them to who they wanted to go to. Now that's seems to us cumbersome and unnecessary, but it wasn't unnecessary apparently at the time, because that's the way people did. I don't think it was
Yeah.
they had to learn it. I think the times, again, the veil was thicker, so it required a little more work.
This reminds me of like past life regressions, or that's what they're called, right? When you go
Yeah.
into hypnosis. And years ago, people would come out of that not remembering anything, but they had just, it's like that trance state. But now it's more likely that you're aware, but you're kind of hearing yourself talk while you're also there. That's
I,
kind of the same.
I think it is. I've said that, like Edgar Cayce, for instance, when Edgar Cayce began his work, he was a very hard shell fundamentalist Protestant. He read the King James Bible every year of his life. His conscious beliefs were so far from what information he was going to bring in, unbeknownst to himself. I don't think he could have done it except in trance, because his conscious mind had to be aside, so they wouldn't be sitting there going, wait a minute, that's blasphemy, or that's
Yeah.
not, or anything like that. But over the years, as he would read the transcripts that he had produced himself, and he would see that they had good results, over the years he became more amenable to it. And by the end of his life, he was pretty much consciously psychic.
That's fascinating.
And I think the same thing may have happened with Jane Roberts. She didn't start from the same place he did. She started as an artistic, atheistic, intellectual, none of which was going where Seth went. And so she began in trance. But over time, the trance lessened, and the difference between what she consciously believed and what she was bringing forth from Seth lessened.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm swinging in the dark here, but that's what I think is happening.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. As you're talking, another question came through that I'm curious about. So, um, it's like when I get this sense that because of the oneness idea, which I feel very strongly is true, that when we cross over, we're able to sort of blend with anything, like blend with the forest, blend with beyond the forest. Like, does so
Yes, I
did
see.
Rita talk about that? I mean, I know because the forest would be a physical, right? But can spirit blend with nature or animals or
Yeah, yeah. Rita didn't have to talk about that because the guys had talked to us about it a long time ago. And they
Mhm.
said what we are, the 3D part of us is only a small part of our larger being. And they said
Mhm.
other parts of our larger being could be animals, plants, clouds, mountains, anything.
Yeah.
Not necessarily politicians, but most things. But if you think that the universe is basically a big thought rather than rocks in space, the difference becomes much less.
Yeah.
Everything, all matter is suffused with spirit. You could look at
Yeah.
it as slowed down spirit. In fact, that's the way I
Mhm.
do look at it. I think of energy as being slowed down spirit, and of course, matter is slowed down energy. It's bound
Yeah.
forms. But by that, you know, a radioactive waste or synthetic fiber or a machine that somebody built, there isn't any reason for them to be any different conceptually than the rest of us, ultimately, because we're all part of the same non-thing, the same thought, the same whatever it is.
And then this is where it gets tricky too, because there's that, but then there's also Rita, the personality of Rita coming to you and you recognizing very clearly that that's who that is. And so there's sort of sense of like identity, personal identity at the same
Well,
time, right?
sure, you could look at it like this. If you were in the city of Charlottesville and maybe there's 50 or 60,000 people here,
Mm-hmm.
conceptually you could talk to any of those 60,000 people, but your neighbors are closer, and it would be easier to talk to the person next to you than
Mm-hmm.
or a person who shares something in common with you. You could say that ultimately we are all one thing, but as they have said in the non 3D, it's not just jello. They said, the concept of fractals? At one
Yes.
level, a fractal is the same thing, and then you go up, or you could go down. They say the
Uh-huh.
universe is built in fractals, and that's why the old expression, as above, so below.
I
So,
love that expression.
so
Yeah.
if you look at our 3D physical existence and you extrapolate what it would be like if we were outside of time and space, there are
Mhm.
some analogies you can draw just on that theory. And and one of them is, yes, we're connected to everything else, but we're not equally closely connected to everything else.
Mm. Okay. Yeah.
And so just as we are both humans and we're both Americans and we're both living in the 21st century,
Mm-hmm.
those are all things we have in common, but there's a huge amount of things we do not have in common. And it takes certain, call it shared interest, call it karma, I don't know, whatever it is, it takes certain things to bring certain people together. Now, to go way back to your earlier question, I believe that Rita and I, at some level, I really don't know I don't know what I believe about what they call contracts. You come in and
Yeah.
I don't know what I believe about that, but I believe it feels like we were here to work, to do this work together. You know,
100%.
I
Yeah.
can't believe it was an accident.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rita was 80 years old when I met her. And at the time, she was thinking, why am I still here? I mean, she used to ask that rhetorically so often. Why am I still here? Because as far as she knew, at 80 years old, she'd had 2 or 3 different careers that were successful. They were interesting. She had
Yeah.
children, she had grandchildren. But yeah, but I'm done. What's the story? And then came 2 years of talking to the guys upstairs, which was a whole different subject.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, whatever work that led to going on after that, after her death. Now, will Rita come back as an as an entity, as an integer? I don't know. And
Mm.
I don't know if she knows, and I don't know if we need to know really. But
Right. Yeah.
she, all I know is that anybody who was alive is alive, and in fact, to go that far, I don't think there's
Mm.
anything dead in the universe.
I
E-
don't either.
yeah, yeah.
There's no such thing.
There are different levels of consciousness, but
Yeah.
I don't see how it could be dead. How could something that is a living thing that's created from the same living thing, how could it be partly dead and partly alive? It doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
sense.
I
And
100% agree. And I don't know, I have a hard time believing that there's really accidents.
I
I'm
don't
not
believe
so
it.
sure about that either.
No, it looks like an accident, but
Yeah.
okay, Faith, let me see what you think of this. This is what I've come to over the years, being pushed by the guys, but also thinking about it on my own. And it really seems to me now that what we call the inside world, the inner world, and the outer
Mm-hmm.
world are actually the same thing. But we perceive the outer world through our senses, which makes it look a little bit dead, a little bit fixed, a little bit chaotic. The
Uh-huh.
inner world we perceive through our intuition, and it seems a little fluid and sometimes chaotic, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. And the
Mm-hmm.
two don't seem to have anything to do with each other. But I think the closer you look at it, the more you realize you're looking at the same thing from two opposite sides in two opposite ways. How can there be a coincidence? Whoa, how it isn't like there's an inner, it isn't like there's an inner and there's an outer and they just happen to come together. they can't come apart.
Yeah. I've always felt that way. And to give a really simple, I guess, analogy for something like that, it's like if your life feels cluttered outside and feels chaotic, um, and then you really go inward and you focus on what's going on in your own mind, I feel like often you'll notice that your mind is cluttered. Your internal senses are kind of going all over the place. You don't have quiet in your day. And you can kind of see that. Like, I know I've noticed it before in my life, just getting deeper into meditation, you start to notice more and more. And there's definitely a
And then
relationship.
you go beyond that, then all of a sudden, all of that external clutter or the conflict or the problems becomes heads up. They become alerts and say, okay, we're putting this in your face now, and you can proactively deal with it and say, okay, what's my part in this? What is this showing
Hmm.
about myself
Yeah,
that I don't know? Because it takes
exactly.
away the victims and villains scenario. You can't blame it
Exactly.
on anybody else. And in
Yes.
fact, there's nothing to blame in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. I try to look at it, and that's another thing to talk about, I guess, is lessons. But I do personally for myself, I tend to look at things as like, what am I learning from this? If something happens to me, I wonder why this happened, instead of like, why me? It's like, what am I getting out of this? Because I feel like there's actually always something to get out of
That's
almost
right.
any experience,
Of
if not.
course, why me is not a bad question, but not if it's, oh, poor me. But if it's
Yeah.
why me, why now? Why in this?
Hmm.
Yeah, good question to ask. And
Yeah.
and again, it takes all the victimization out of it. It takes all
Hmm.
the fear out of it. Because what is
Hmm.
fear except people thinking, I'm not in control of this and I don't know what's going to happen next. And oh no, and oh my God. But if you go,
Hmm.
well, I'm not in control and I don't need to be in control. And if it
Yeah.
can happen accidentally, it takes a lot of the problem out of it.
Hmm. All
Makes us
right.
much
So
more boring.
what was that?
Makes us much more boring people. We lose all
Much
the
more boring.
drama.
Um, okay, so I'm just kind of curious what might jump off your mind as far as anything else Rita had talked to you about or whatever came through.
Well, gosh, there's so much. I
So
did
much, yeah.
I did mention to you earlier that I coincidentally, accidentally, so called, right, picking up the old Sphere and Hologram book that was made of the
Yes.
sessions Rita and I had done. I came
Yes.
across two sections there. At one point, we were doing the sessions every week, and I was typing them up and sending them out. And at one point, we suggested to people, if you have questions, ask them. So people
Mm-hmm.
started sending in the questions, and Rita would ask the questions, and I would respond, by way of an altered state, the guys would respond.
That's
I
awesome.
found a
Yeah.
couple that I really think would be of interest. If you want to hear,
Yes. I would love
what,
that.
all right, means you have to look at me with my glasses because that's the way it goes. So somebody asked, um, okay, I'll just read it as the dialogue was. Okay.
Okay.
Read. Well, here's an easy one. A question from the same person. TGU. We'd like to know what an easy question is. It'll be interesting to see this. Rita chuckles. What would you recommend as the 5 best exercises for spiritual advancement? Practice love every day.
Mm.
Find some object to love, whether it's a pet or a flower or an abstraction or a car. It would be better if it were a person. As you practice this day by day, raise the bar so that practice loving something that's successively less lovable. Anyone can love a dog because the dog thinks you're wonderful. It takes a little more to love a cat because the cat thinks it's wonderful. It takes more to love a woodchuck because the woodchuck doesn't care one way or the other. It takes even more to love a rattlesnake because you may be afraid of it, you see.
Mm.
So you could easily raise the bar a little bit every day. The practice
Mm.
of love is the practice of overcoming the illusion of distance. I like that.
Wow, that is so
Practice of
good.
love, yeah, yeah. That's really 1 through 5. But another exercise, pause. Well, this won't seem to
Mm.
have anything to do with the subject. Practice changing points of view. When
Mhm.
you're in a dispute, or even if you're in a pleasant exchange with someone, try every so often changing into their point of view. Try to really see it as they see it, as opposed to the way you see it. All right?
Mhm.
Swap back and forth. Now, that seems to have nothing to do with spiritual self development, but you'll be astonished if you're able to do it. Difficult exercise. Pause, chuckle. Do we have to come up with 5? Those are 2 very good exercises.
Those are amazing.
Rita says, well, we don't. That's true, just because he asked. TGU, give us a moment here. Pause. Well, of course, a third one is practice mindfulness, by which we mean do everything remembering that you are doing everything. In other
Mm.
words, don't let your attention flow outward to the object without also being internally lit in your own being. So when you look at the watch, remember that you're looking at the watch. Don't only look at the time. When you're driving a car,
Mm.
remember that you're driving a car. Don't only just drive the car. Again, this is the kind of exercise that can be scaled up as you get better at it. Although it's not predictable what will be easy and what will be difficult, it will be different for different people. So those are 3 exercises anyway. You notice what they have in common is the using of a certain kind, the raising of a certain kind of consciousness. Because the giving of love is also an experience of love. It's a becoming familiar with love. So it's a form of consciousness raising as well. We would leave it as that for now. Very good question. So
Wow, that is
yeah.
so good. And I love their humor too.
Oh, well, that speaking of Rita and me, when we first began this, Rita had had many, 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 many years, literally decades, of dealing with
Mhm.
people who were in altered states and
Mhm.
Monroe and doing all that. And she was not sure what was going on at first because the guys and I were joking from the beginning.
Oh,
And
really?
and it was a problem for her. She actually brought it up at one point to humor because she took that to mean I couldn't put my own consciousness to the side. I was having to stay in charge. And ultimately, they had to explain this is not what you think it is. It's a different way of working, right? But
Yeah.
she was not in all those years used to the humor. And I'll tell you what, I don't know what else the guys are, but they are excellent teachers. They're excellent uh,
Mhm.
pedagogues because that was part of their pedagogical technique is humor. They continually
Yeah.
would say, we are not gods, you are not worms. Too much distance, too much respect is as distancing
Mm.
as contempt. So they would even go into goofy humor, which I like anyway. And I think it was, I'm assuming it was conscious on their part that they were always, how should we say it, raising the bar or lowering the temperature. It depends on which way you want to look at it. But you know yourself in your own life, humor, laughing
Yeah.
especially. If you probably do this in your healing practice. When I would be working with people, I would always be cracking jokes, and they didn't have to be good jokes, but they were jokes, and it loosened something. You know,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Humor's, oh my God, it instantly raises your, I don't know what you want to say. It uplifts you and it just opens you. It's so good. And there
Yeah.
is definitely cosmic humor. Like walking around through life, there is humor going on that's out of our control, that is designed. It's
We may be the cosmic humor.
yeah, we're definitely part of
Some
it.
people think Earth is a school. It may just be stand up.
Yeah. And it also it's unifying too. When people
Yes,
laugh, they kind of like it brings people together.
yes, it does. Yes, it does. But it is a terrific. Uh, it's almost too simple to say. I mean, it's hard
Mm.
to find words that really do it justice. Because one problem with talking about any of this stuff is the talking about it makes it seem a little more serious and cosmic than it really is. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It almost overdoes it. And the guys, they're all about keeping it simple, keeping it usable.
That's so refreshing to hear. It
And
drives me crazy to see like people give you like all these steps, like you have to, and acronyms and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't know, maybe just breathe. Take a deep breath, like.
on the one hand, you have to respect they're working hard to get it, but
Mhm.
on the other hand, their solution is more complicated than the problem, you know. And I
Yeah,
have had now, I've probably had 20 years or more of it. Oh yeah, gosh, I had like 25 years of experience with this stuff, and
amazing.
and it's hard sometimes. Is not so hard for people who've been through the Monroe Institute because they've had their own anomalous experiences enough to know it's just life. But
Mm,
it can be hard to get to persuade people that it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's true. You're only going to get good results if you stand on one leg, wearing purple, and you know shaving your head. Other than that, you can't get anything. But I mean, people will make these rules, and of course,
yeah.
if you make a rule and you believe the rule's true. It's not going to work for you because you won't allow it to work. But if you tell them, look, it's easier than that, just almost fantasize. You know, the people who can believe it enough to try it are somewhat surprised because it works. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, they're too used to thinking there has to be rules, has to be steps. It can't be that easy, or everybody would be doing it. And
Right, yeah. And it's got to be a personality thing too, like the way your brain works. But for me, too many steps and too much effort into it, it actually takes me out of that. Like if I'm trying to do mediumship or something, I have to not think. I don't want to be thinking about how I'm going to get into an altered state. I just have to relax into it.
that's right. Faith, you're exactly on target. And I can give you a little scaffolding for that if you want. And that is, as you know, our brains are two parts. The one
Hmm.
part is the gestalt, and that's what you're working from when you're in mediumship. The other
Hmm.
half is the sequential, which does the words and does the sequence one, does all the thinking. You can't
Yeah.
think and perceive at the same time. So
Yeah.
all those rules and all that stuff, it's okay if people need that to get into a place, but if it gets them to that place, they've then got to stop doing that, or they're not going to be able to get in the perceptual part.
Then they
Right?
have to unlearn.
Yes, they do. And
Yeah.
Bruce Moen, who was a friend of mine and wrote several books, he was a long time Monroe experiencer before I was actually. But Bruce made it very clear. I've never forgotten this. He said there are two steps. There's perception, and then there's interpretation. But you can't
Mm.
do both at the same time. As soon as
Yeah,
you
you
as
can't.
soon as you start interpreting what you just perceived, you've stopped perceiving.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean you can't go right back to perceiving. You can go like this, or you can
Hmm.
all perceiving and then interpret it later. But you cannot do both at the same time. And so
No.
if your preparations are too elaborate, as you were saying, they can get in the way. Sure, they can.
Hmm.
Like trying to swim the English Channel carrying an anchor. I suppose you can do it if you have to, but really not required.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've always noticed it's like the less I try, the easier. But
Yes,
it's that letting go is the big thing. It's like letting go of the expectation, of the outcome, of the desire even so much. Like
right.
maybe
That's
there's
right.
desire still, but it's like I'm not clinging to this thing I want so badly. I'm just like, well, let it go and see what happens. And it always comes to me quicker when
I
I
would
do that.
say, I would say that what you're doing, and I remember when Ram Dass talked about this, and I couldn't understand it. It's hard for me now to realize I couldn't understand it. Be here now. That's what you're
Yeah.
doing. You're being here now. You are not partly elsewhere. You are not trying to remember your steps. You are not going, I didn't finish with my procedure. You're right here. You're right now. Just
Is that
like
the
in the
key?
hypnagogic state, just between waking and sleeping. That's
Uh-huh.
perfect,
Yeah.
because and it's difficult and until you learn the trick. And then once you learn the trick, it's not difficult. But until you learn it, it's difficult to be uh, not conscious without being unconscious. that's a terrible way to say it, but you know what I mean? You're if you're in that half sleeping state, you're not
Yeah.
running, but you're remembering still, and that's what you need to do.
Hmm.
And I gotta
I'm
tell you,
trying to think of another way to put that in like
I hope
simpler.
we can find a better way.
I know, I'm trying to think
I
of
can
a.
tell you how I learned it. I was in a seminar in graduate school before you were born. This was back in 1971, but it was a Friday afternoon and the room was hot and there were only like 13 of us and the professor around the circular table. And I wanted to go to sleep in the worst way. And I couldn't go to sleep because there's the professor. And it took me like 50 minutes and I had a headache. And it was, oh man, it was excruciating. Much
Oh,
later, I realized that was right there on the hypnagogic state. I was just between waking and sleeping. I was awake enough
mhm.
that I couldn't sleep. I was asleep enough that I couldn't really wake. I mean, I couldn't function. And I could have pulled, if I had enough energy to pull myself fully into the present, then
Mhm.
that would have gone away. If I had catastrophically gone to sleep, it would have gone away.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they work with you at like 3 a.m. or in the middle of the night because you're in that space, right?
I have to think about that. That's an interesting question. I don't know. I would hesitate to say yes because it can happen at any time. I mean, but initially, probably yes. Initially,
Mm-hmm.
that was required. It's a
Mm-hmm.
funny thing because if you're in the middle of an asthma attack and you're doing something physical, even if you're driving a car or you're working with the journal, talking to the guys, that actually
Mm-hmm.
helps you because it takes some of your attention away from your lungs and they begin to function the way they're supposed to function again.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you might be in the middle of an attack when you begin, and a few minutes later realize you're not in trouble anymore. So that was a nice little uh, fringe benefit.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me, I don't want to go too far off topic, but real quick, like I take breathwork classes, and when I take those, there's people in there who, I mean, it puts you in an altered state quickly. And there's people in there who have body pain who feel nothing while they're there. Like all of their pain is gone the entire class. Or people who come back saying that they've healed past life traumas because I guess it would be contacting different threads or touching on different threads and being able to do some sort of healing
And it has a
during
physical
that.
effect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it has a physical effect.
Well, actually,
That's
you're not
crazy.
off the topic at all. Faith, and I'll give you a small story. My friend Ed Carter and I, and that's a long story in itself. Maybe we'll talk about it at some point. But Ed
Hmm.
and I, for about a year, were sharing an apartment. He actually lived in New Hampshire, but he would like to come down to the Monroe and visit like for a week at a time. So he paid
Hmm.
for half the apartment, and I was at the time, my family was still down in Norfolk, and I was in Charlottesville with the company, so I would be there during the week. So we run. Anyway, he came to visit and wanted to do a session with the guys upstairs, and that was fine with me. But I had been coughing and coughing and coughing and couldn't stop coughing. And this had gone on for a couple of days. And Ed said, well, I guess we can't do the session. I said, well, let's try it anyway. And
Hmm.
and I lay down on my back. And if you ever knew anybody with asthma, you would know that's not possible. You cannot do that while you're having an asthma attack.
Yeah.
But I did it. And we went through, I suppose it was about 40 minutes. His tape recorder clicked, the end of the session, end of the tape. And while he was
Yeah.
flipping the tape and I went off to use the bathroom in between, he said, do you have anything you want to ask him? I said, yeah. Ask him how come I'm coughing like this because I had started again. And as soon as I'm talking to them, I'm not coughing. And I was kind of kidding in a way, but before I even got to the bathroom door, I knew the answer. And I put it down later.
Hmm.
The guys would say that our physical health is a ratio between our mental state and our physical state. The mental
Okay.
state moves all the time. That's practically a definition of consciousness, that it never
Yeah.
stays in place. So you can move that and it'll change your health instantly, but it won't stay. It takes a lot more to change your physical condition, but if you do, it's much more permanent and it's less able to move. Okay. But if you need an instant cure, changing your physical state is not really possible, but changing your mental state can be done immediately. Okay.
Which would that then change your physical
Well,
eventually?
it changes the immediate impact of it. So
Hmm.
if let's say, supposing you had shingles or which Ed did actually, and we were able to work on that. But supposing you had shingles, it's a very painful nerve disease. If you're able to change the mental component so that it doesn't manifest while you're in that different mental component, you still actually have the situation. It's not
Yeah.
manifesting. You're not feeling it.
Hmm.
If you want to really get rid of it, you have to change it physically for duration. I once had a tooth pulled out and they had to drill and do all kinds of things because
Ugh.
I think it was an implant. So they had to
Mm.
drill way up in there. And he had already given me Novocaine, but he said, take this prescription and go to the post office, go to the go to the drugstore now. He said, because you're going to need it. All right. So I'm standing in line at the drugstore. And a version of drugstores anyway, you can see it's coming out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the stuff he had given me wore out. And I mean, just like that. And I had
Mm.
crippling pain, almost dropped me to the floor.
Oh my gosh.
But then I stopped and I thought, wait a minute. And I said, look, like I'm talking to my body. I'm saying, I
Uh,
know it hurts, but it's under control. It was designed for something and it's going to be okay. I don't need all this pain. It's not helpful. And pain went away.
ah.
Pain went away. And I went up. I did fill the prescription because he had given me the prescription. I thought, well, I better fill it.
Hmm.
Never
Might as
used,
well.
never used it. Never had to use it.
No way.
Yes, and I've done similar things before. It's not 100%. Sometimes it doesn't
Hmm.
work, and I never know why something will or won't work. But I
Yeah.
do know the more I've helped other people with it as well, because it's a new idea to people. And once they've tried it and they realize it works, that's the only help that I've given them is put the idea in their head. But if
Yeah.
you talk to your body and say, I know that this has been a problem. I know that I broke my arm and it's in a cast on. I don't need the pain to tell me that. It'll be okay. And I'll
Hmm.
be careful, you know, like the other day I burnt my finger. I accidentally, well, it doesn't matter why, but I burnt it. So I did this, where you reduce the energy part of it. But then I remembered to talk to it. And I said, oh,
Oh,
it's just a flip and it won't happen again. And
I love that.
and it was gone. Well, these are all perfectly human abilities, but they're knacks, and nobody
Yeah.
teaches them. Well, not nobody,
No.
but
No.
well, not
And it
nobody.
makes sense. Your body's trying to tell you you're hurt, but if you talk back to it, it's like, it's okay. It's okay.
That's
I know.
well, I'll give you another example. We were sort of way off the topic of Rita, but everything leads to everything
I
else.
know.
I used to be really annoyed and angry, really, at my lungs because I had all this trouble with asthma. Until one day, I finally got an ounce of sense in my head, and I realized they really need compassion and help. They're doing the
Hmm.
best they can for me. And that changed my whole attitude to it. And I think if
Yeah.
people realize that we're alive all the way down to the molecular level and that there are minds within each organ and presumably within
Hmm.
each tissue, and that they are trying to help. You know what I think sometimes, Faith? This is not
That's,
the guys, this is me. I sometimes
uh-huh.
think we are the higher mind for our bodies.
Yeah. Wow. I like
It's
that.
intelligent, but it doesn't read the New York Times. Now, maybe it's intelligent because it doesn't read the New York Times, but
Yeah.
its intelligence is what it does. It filters water, right? Or
Hmm.
something else filters blood sugar, or
Yeah.
all of those things. The intelligences are different and they do different things, but they're all intelligent. And we may be, this is just a hypothesis, we may be the common denominator that holds them
Yeah.
all. We're the, like,
Uh, that makes so much sense to me. It's funny too, like when I meditate, I don't ask with words, but I send my awareness to certain parts of my body, and I'm actually starting to like not like words internally much, like
well,
quieting the inner monologue, but realizing that you can just use intention, pure intention. And so just to quiet my, like not quiet, to almost go into like that vibration kind of feeling when you're meditating, or just a sensation that deepens just by focusing on like the feet and then going up, and you'll feel that specific body part change as you focus on it. So it's
um,
fun, I think.
when you do healing, do you ever send the energy through your palm chakra.
Yeah,
Yeah,
through the palms.
and do you ever ask spirit of healing to come in and work through you?
Every time I ask, yes.
And you can feel the energy. You can
Yes.
feel yourself in like the center of a, I don't know, it reminds me of plasma or something. It's like
Yeah.
a neon tube. Yeah.
I feel it as like, actually, a lot of people feel heat, but I feel a coolness actually. And I also feel like a pressure, like I can hold it.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
yeah.
You know, you sounded like you're a little almost not sure about it, but it seems to me that you're moving away from words and more toward the experience is exactly the right direction because the words are sequential and sequential gets in the way. And
Yeah.
true that we're used to thinking in words, but we can also be used to thinking in symbols. And as we think in symbols, things change.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what? When I just said that, it just struck me. That's the difference between us and the ancient Egyptians. I bet a hat. They thought in symbols. You know, hieroglyphs are very different from an alphabet.
Absolutely.
That could be totally wrong, but that just suddenly came to me.
Symbols
And
are powerful.
yeah,
Well, we're almost it's
I
almost
know.
4:30 over here at my time, and we definitely sidetracked again.
No, I don't think we did. I think it all connects. I
It
mean,
does all
I'm
connect.
happy with it if you're happy.
Yeah.
And we can still at some point ask Rita if she wants to come in, but I don't think she's got a busy dance card. So I think whatever we ask would be all right.
Yeah, I do too. Maybe we could do that next time, actually.
And
Yeah.
I'm at this point in my life, I'm fine with doing whatever comes. We're here, we're now. Let it, the moment has
Yeah.
its qualities. And you know, Carl Jung himself said, every moment has its own qualities. One moment is not the same as the next moment. That didn't even
Mm-hmm.
make a lot of sense to his contemporaries. I mean, a lot of them accused him of mysticism and all, but it seems obvious.
Yeah, it is obvious.
I did
And
have one follow-up question I wanted to ask, Frank, going
Okay.
along the lines of what Faith has been asking. In your discussions with Rita, how much of it was in language and how much was in images, symbols, or anything else?
I would say almost all of it was language, but not like my taking dictation. I would know to write. And as I wrote, it would make sense, you know, as it came. It wasn't a question of it. My hearing Rita go, okay, now point B is, okay, now point B is. But it as fast as I could write it, it would come. And there was no what's the word I want? You know, preconception. There was no pre-auditing or anything. It would just come. And that's
Mm-hmm.
probably, I never thought of it this way, Dirk, but that's probably as close as you can come to functioning in a Gestalt manner when you're having to deal with words, is just to be there and write down what comes as it comes. So it's like you're there at the moment, and the result is a sequential record, but you didn't exactly get it sequentially. You sort of did, but you sort of didn't. It depends on how you want to look at it. I'd never thought of that in all these years.
Well, the reason I ask is, as we've discussed before for myself, I don't think in language. I think in what I refer to as idea shapes that I'll manipulate them in my mind, and they're not exactly shapes, but it's something abstract. And then once I've come to an answer, the way I end up translating into English is by traversing the idea shape, and that becomes whatever comes out. A lot gets left by the wayside, and there's a lot about the interaction that isn't included. But that's how I end up ending. As I'm stumbling even now, I'm thinking of an idea shape, and that's part of the stumble is I'm trying to figure out how to traverse it as I'm speaking, and that creates a confusion. But the amount of information you can handle that way is so much greater and so much richer.
Well, for one thing, you've got a very strong processor, and your mind works faster as well as deeper. So it doesn't surprise me, but I can't really understand what you're saying. I mean, you've talked about idea shapes, and I have a vague idea of them as more like gestalts than like words.
It is.
I don't have any firsthand experience of that, and I have to take your word for it.
But what got me there was Faith, your question, that I suspect you're beginning to do exactly that. You're beginning to have echoes of the same thing.
Thinking in shapes.
Well, it's like in mediumship, you have inner senses, and so you can see, you can hear, you can feel, or you can just know. And so I call it knowing. And I realize the more I practice that, you don't even need the words. The words, you
The
can
words
just
actually
have the
go away.
knowing or the intention. The I like to call it like a packet. It's like a packet of information, kind of. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the same.
Dirk, does that sound like what you're doing? Because I understood it in those terms.
The package you're talking about, I think, is probably what I'm referring to.
Okay.
I think I have a little more sense of exactly what it is, and I'm interacting with it more than you are, where you're getting it as a final thing.
Yeah.
And I think this is Bob Monroe's Rotes, by the way. I think it's the same thing.
I mean, I understood what he was saying, but I could never do it. And so, as you know, I'm very linear, actually. It's a funny thing for somebody in my position. I'm nothing but a writer, you know.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. In college, I ended up challenging and with the permission of the dean and the instructor, I did a 500 level psych course without any prerequisites. That was a long story, but anyway, one of the first things that came up, we were talking about this kind of subject, and I challenged them that people think in either of two ways, either linearly or in Gestalt.
Okay.
And I forget which way it is, but it's a 1/3, 2/3. I think there's a third of people think in Gestalt and 2/3 are linear, but it may be the other way.
No, I bet that's it.
And so we asked the class, we did as a challenge to the class of having them try a couple of problems, and it turned out it exactly matched the statistics. And
Oh,
the
interesting.
instructor, who was a professional in psychology, she had never even heard of this. That set me up for the next couple of classes of going through the whole thing. But it was fascinating to see how much difference there was in how we actually process information in our minds.
You
I
know,
love learning about other people's inner worlds. I love that.
I'm thinking we're talking about Rita and all these, but there's no reason we couldn't do a session just on that kind of thing itself.
Exactly. Well, and I'll toss in one more to consider as you guys resume next week is I had a trip on an airplane once coming back from the Monroe Institute. And it happened I was sitting next to this young gal, and we got into a very animated discussion and all kinds of things. And something about it, she wanted to take a note. And she's the only person I've ever seen do this. She reached into her bag and pulled out a journal and opened it and proceeded to draw her thing.
I love that.
She didn't write. She made an image of what the thought was and then put it away. And it's
That's
like,
amazing.
I had never considered that.
I would love to see that. What that was, like what the subject was and what the thought image was.
The particular image she drew was a crow sitting on a branch, and there was other parts of the scene.
Mhm.
And it very well described what we were talking about in symbolic terms. It's like,
I love that.
huh, that's different.
Wonder how she does with dreams. She probably does very well with them.
Well, we
Yeah.
only had about an hour and a half from one place to another, or otherwise we would have got into that.
It
It was
seemed
great.
like an hour and a half.
Anyway, great job today. Wonderful talk.
Well, thank you for your facilitation as always. And Faith, these
Yeah.
are great questions. Keep them up.
Thank you guys.
And so until next time, thank you all.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.